Hi, everybody. I hope you are continuing to enjoy exploring French culture in this class. I would like to ask you if you would consider some of the cultural differences in restaurants and food culture in France, and to learn some key words that may be useful in a variety of menus. The French culture has a rich tradition of making every meal an occasion. Um, Here are some things that the French don't do that we do. It is entirely polite and appropriate in our culture. For instance, let's say you're on the street in New York City, a place where there are some fine restaurants, to go buy yourself a hot dog at a hot dog vendor and walk along the street while chewing. There are a few food stands in France that you'll find, like crepe stands. But normally, traditionally, French people take the crepe and go indoors somewhere to eat it. They don't just walk down the street with food. Why not? Because they understand food as a special occasion. Another thing that they really rarely do is chew mindlessly in front of a TV or a computer at work. People really don't sort of binge eat snacks while they watch a movie. You can buy popcorn in some movie theaters in France, but it's generally not what everybody does. I'm sorry, the snorting is my dog who's rubbing her face on the chair next to me. The French do eat fast food, particularly when they're young. And let us admit, all of our metabolisms were better at processing our digestion of fast food when we were 15 than they are even by the time we're, 30. But the truth is that it's considered, except when you're young and you're just being outside of your family sphere, which would include food, a lesser event, a lesser occasion to eat fast food. McDonald's and company manage to stay in business in France and not just from tourists, but it is really not a typical place where people eat. They'd much rather cook something at home, however simply, than to go get a McBurger of some kind. And the French even have an expression, which is on est à table, which means mind your table manners, basically. One is meaning we are, at the table. And in fact, people use it if they feel that their friends are not behaving quite right. They'll say, Maurice, on est à table. Even if you're not at a table, as a way to sort of say, come on, cool it, Maurice, behave better. The French take their culinary traditions and their dining traditions is a very serious part of their culture, and it is one of the delights for tourists. If you let yourself experience it on their terms, allow yourself, if you want to go to a French restaurant, a good amount of time to sit there and just enjoy. Another thing that's lovely about a French meal at a restaurant is that they will never come pick up the check while you are just sitting there. Until you ask them. They anticipate that your paying for the meal is also a way for you to basically pay for a real estate rental of this table. And the assumption is that you will surely want to sit and converse, and hopefully you'll order another glass of wine while you do it. Or another alcoholic beverage that the French would generally call un digestif. I will talk more about this later, but accept that food doesn't happen the same way and enjoy the way it does, because, my God, they're really good at their version of a meal. And not only do they eat slowly, they tend to value cooking things slowly. There are very delightful traditions outside of American fast food that cook things quickly. I think of the Chinese wok. There's nothing less than about a wok. But the whole point is that the food spends a very small amount of time on top of a high flame to get it to be what it is served to the person who eats it much of the time. And the French really do prefer a slow food diet. And they eat 3 meals a day. And you've probably heard about what they call the French miracle, low cholesterol, which indeed, until fast food became a slightly more common thing, was really remarkable given the fact that they really do eat what they eat without any apology for butter in it. But here is what they eat. They have a very small breakfast. As a rule, it's not considered unhealthy to skip breakfast. If they eat a breakfast, it's often what are called tartines au beurre. And tartines au beurre literally means you take the baguette from the night before, you take some butter, and you spread it on the piece of baguette, and you just eat that. A tartine might be about, this long, 4 or 5 inches in length, and that's breakfast. Anything that is a breakfast that's bigger, they call un petit déjeuner anglais. Un petit déjeuner anglais would be an English breakfast. That's how they call it. The American breakfast is, except in restaurants that cater specifically to American tourists, almost entirely unknown. A long lunch is the second meal of the day. And just so you understand, you get 2 hours of lunch. Hour in most businesses. And the idea is that if you had a quick errand to do in the neighborhood, like let's say you need to deposit a check at a bank, let's say you needed to pick up something at a store in the neighborhood, you could do it during your lunch hour. But plenty of people just sit at the restaurant and eat a 2-hour meal. And it is that lunch is both long and it's heavier than many of our meals. You can have many kinds of meals, but a lot of people eat un steak frite, which is, a beef steak, usually like a rib steak, like an entrecôte is what they call that. And you'd have some fries. You'd begin with maybe a little soup, and I mean a little soup, like a cup, or a salad, which would again be small. But a steak with fries and possibly another vegetable with it, maybe some sauteed carrots or something. And then you could even have for that meal, usually people take a choice in such a situation of either they're going to have a cheese course with a little fruit and cheese, or they're going to have a more formal dessert, which will be a small pastry perhaps, or something like that. And then, a tea or coffee afterwards. So it's a fairly large lunch. It's not a sandwich with chips in a bag that you take to your desk and you chew on. And then a dinner would be both long and full. If you're at home, you're likely to have a 3-course meal, appetizer, main course, and dessert. If you were going to have guests over, or if you were going to go out to a more fancy dinner, that dinner really may include an apéritif, which is a cocktail beforehand, and a digestif at the end of the meal, which is a cocktail at the end, a little bit of wine at each course throughout. I'm talking maybe 2 or 3 glasses of wine total. And you would have an appetizer, which could be a salad, or it could be something like foie gras, duck liver, or a terrine, which is a slow cooked meat dish, which is cooked at a very low temperature, sometimes for 6 to 8 hours at that low temperature. It could be a soup, of course. It could be sometimes a piece of smoked fish. That's kind of a tradition as well. A main course, which is the largest course that people eat during the course of the day. But again, their portions are smaller than ours. So we are still talking about usually a smaller, rich dish, like, maigret de canard means a duck breast. You would just simply create a menu if you were a restaurant that included a few choices for the main course. And then there is often, if you are out to dinner or it is we're receiving guests kind of a situation, you might offer a cheese and fresh fruit course. And I mean, not a large piece of rich cheese with maybe a single piece of fruit, or maybe 2 apricots or something like that. But nevertheless, that followed by a dish that is usually a very rich but not very large dessert. Sometimes the dessert is followed while they bring you the check at a restaurant with something called mignardises. Mignardises are the world's tiniest little cookies or candies, not quite like an after-dinner mint, nicer than that, sometimes like a little almond cookie, like the world's smallest madeleine, about that big, but a bunch of them, so you could have a few. So people eat really well, really slowly, and the food is cooked slowly. The French consider cuisine a priority in their culture in a way that Americans do not. It's not that we don't enjoy dining. God knows we eat plenty of food, but the subtle flavors that the French appreciate are not like our Cajun spices or our hot peppers for a variety of cultures. They are more like, I can taste the fennel in this fish course. It's so subtly blended with the cream sauce, that kind of thing. And I'm talking to you largely in this video about the vocabulary associated with the menu for the French, and I'm going to add at the end a general collection of expressions for you that may come up in dining. I think that one of the most exciting things that happens when you are a tourist in France is you get the opportunity to live in the French culture the way that they experience food. So the words for meals are le petit déjeuner, breakfast, and like I said, a tartine au beurre is just often bread, butter, and coffee, very strong French coffee, espresso basically, we would say. Le déjeuner is a full lunch of small portions, but often with multiple courses and wine. It is not considered strange to drink wine in the middle of the workday. It's not quite the 3 martini lunch of the 1950s for businessmen. People are expected to know how to hold the alcohol they consume. You rarely see people crazy drunk in France unless they are tourists. People learn to hold their liquor, something that as an Irish person who was probably predisposed genetically to being able to hold my liquor, I respect. And then le dîner, as I said, has multiple courses. It has l'entrée, which We call an entree the main course, but that's the first thing. If you think about it, like its entry point is the way it's written. Le plat principal is the course that is specifically the main course. Le fromage, and sometimes it'll just be listed fromage, and you'll see that there's more than one kind of option with cheese and fruit. Sometimes people just come by with a little trolley and ask you what you want from their cheese collection. Le dessert, a small but very rich dessert. I'll write down some additional vocabulary again to go with this at the end of the video. So, le menu à 25 euros, which would definitely not be in this particular room. There's a good chance that you received from me a menu that shows you this restaurant's menu. This is the view. That is Notre Dame, you see. This is the view at sunset at La Tour d'Argent, which is one of the oldest and most traditional French restaurants. There are many good restaurants in Paris. This is one of the best old restaurants by far. Definitely one of the ones that has the best, alcohol and wine selection. And many restaurants have either a prix menu, which means you pay a flat fee and there are only a few choices, or you can order, as we would say, à la carte, which literally means from the menu, from the larger menu, we might say. And it will probably cost a little more, but you'll get precisely what you want. In a restaurant that it has a good reputation, I promise you that they will not in some way disappoint you with the menu choices. It's not like they're giving you rock gut stuff. If it's a tourist trap, you'll have to judge for yourself. So you have a choice between their choices to put together a meal with several options, or you can just pick and choose from usually a much wider menu. A lot of people in France just take the le menu because it's easiest, and if you are just in exploring what they would feed you, and you're in a good restaurant, I don't believe that you will be somehow malpracticed. It's not. They would be horrified if you came back to the United States at the Tour d'Argent, just as one example of many good restaurants, and you said their food was atrocious. They would be almost like those Monty Python characters who where the client is found at the restaurant has found the dirty fork, and there's like a mass suicide of people working that fall on the ground dying, and the Python skit is quite funny. But I promise you that you'll get fed something good. Here are some fancy words on menus. There are less fancy ways within French of saying these things. It means that they are likely to charge you more, quite frankly, if they say it this way. They would tell you, the chefs would tell you, it is because it's not just like you were in somebody's private home. We're doing a higher level of cuisine than what people generally do in their homes. And maybe they're right. In France, I would say they're right. In America, I'm not so sure. Anyway, here are the terms. Le suprême de volaille. Let me say that again. Suprême de volaille. That is a chicken breast. L'entrecôte is a rib steak. L'épaule farcie is farcie means something that is stuffed, and l'épaule farcie, we don't normally think about shoulder roasts of pork being stuffed, but the French do it, and it's lovely. They'll add things like currants and cognac, and oh my God, I wouldn't say no to a stuffed shoulder of pork. Le cassoulet is a Provençal dish, meaning it's from the south of France, and it's a traditional meat stew with beans. Le sanglier Le sanglier is wild boar. And I'm just going to tell you now, there's a very good chance if they're serving wild boar, it's going to be the best food you've ever had in your life. The best thing I ever ate was this incredible terrine, une terrine de sanglier, meaning it was a slow cooked, almost like a pate of wild boar meat with cognac and apricots mixed together as a stuffing for the meat. OMG, it was a sign that God is real. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway, le sanglier is wild boar. Les coquilles Saint-Jacques sounds very fancy, almost churchy, because you've got Saint-Jacques, Saint Jack. But it just means sea scallops. And unlike most American restaurants, they serve it actually on the scallop shell, often with what's called le corail, which is the orange piece that we don't eat. Les fruits de mer looks like sea fruit. If you translate it word for word, it means seafood. Le lot is a monkfish. We don't eat a lot of monkfish, but it's a very nice white fish. It's less feels less Arctic than cod. Le bar is sea bass. Les moules are mussels. And so you have just this marvelous collection of possibilities. Obviously, if your phone has a dictionary, you may want to look up other very unusual terms. I'm going to tell you that these are common ones. This is a whole lot of high-end menus. There are a few key phrases that you'll want at almost any place where you're in a restaurant. One is very simple. L'addition, s'il vous plaît. Looks like addition. L'addition, s'il vous plaît. That's check, please. The French restaurant will almost never bring you your check until you ask for it. They would have to be able to say to you, I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to close. As a general rule, is the one polite option they have if you truly are eating a late dinner. And then I want to explain, you'll see this often on menus, service compris. Compris in this case means included, service included. And the way that the French government has set things up, they have not left customers in restaurants and cafes usually at the mercy of the mood of the tourist. Anything you leave above, and I suggest that you consider it if you got exceptional service, add a little more. I wouldn't add more than 5% of the check to it at any point, because usually people are getting 15% at least. If you truly loved what happened, I mean, if this was a religious experience, you saw the face of God in that monkfish, then maybe you're leaving a significantly bigger tip. But no one walks away as a drunk tourist from a table where if they've paid the bill, that they haven't given a tip to the servers. But anything else that you leave would surely be appreciated. That's about what I have to say about those two phrases. So, service compris and l'addition, s'il vous plaît. In class, I am going to go over the terms for things like fork, knife, spoon, napkin, tablecloth, things like this. But I am giving you a little bit of homework associated with this world of high culinary French. I want you, some people, I find it very morbid to say, write down what you would have as your ideal last meal. That's not a game I want to play. First of all, I'm going to be 120. Second of all, I'm sure I'm going to be surrounded by chorus boys. Third of all, I won't be thinking about food because I'll be surrounded by chorus boys and I'll be 120. I might be a little tired at that point from the 14 chorus boys I have around me dancing with me. But But the idea of imagining some meals or a meal that would be for you kind of a dream meal from a French tradition might be a ton of fun. It'll allow you to think perhaps more deeply, to think about research of what that looks like. I promise you the food is so good. You're going to have such a great time. But bring to class, if you can, the name of what you want to eat in French, say a several course meal, unless you are truly fasting for some noble cause. If you are trying to fast and pray for the end of a war, don't let me rain on your parade. But my goodness, the French would tell you, on est à table. We're at the table. It's time to eat. And it's time to think about the words you use when you're in a restaurant and you want to eat something.